Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood is one of the best movies of the 21st century, most celebrated for the Oscar-winning cinematography and Daniel Day-Lewis drinking our milkshakes.
I drink your milkshake.
As a screenwriter, I am biased, but I want to argue that what is on the screen is a masterpiece in large part because of what was on the page. I want to share 8 things that P.T. Anderson, who wrote and directed the movie, did with the screenplay that helped make the movie so great. If you're just a fan of movies, this video may help give you a deeper understanding of how they're constructed. But if you're a screenwriter, you can actually use these lessons in your own scripts. It's not a brilliant insight to say that characters should oppose each other in a story. That's drama 101. The protagonist is opposed by the antagonist, creating conflict, which creates drama. But characters in conflict don't necessarily stay in conflict. They can repel each other like oil and water. And if they're separated, the conflict ceases and you lose the drama. The task of the writer is to keep them in conflict throughout the story, and there are different ways of doing this. For one, you can give the protagonist and antagonist a shared goal, and only one of them can get it, like 2 coworkers fighting over a promotion. Another approach is to make the antagonist invested in what happens to the protagonist and make them believe that the protagonist shouldn't get their goal, like concerned parents who are keeping their teenage kid from going to a potentially dangerous party. But in There Will Be Blood, Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday want different things and they want nothing to do with each other. So how do you keep them in conflict? You build your story in such a way that they're forced to come into contact with each other again and again because each has something that the other needs. Eli controls access to land for oil and a pipeline, which Daniel wants, and Daniel controls access to money, which Eli wants.
I would like a $100,000 signing bonus plus the $5 that is owed to me with interest.
This creates an unstable equilibrium where power keeps shifting back and forth and the conflict keeps renewing with added layers of resentment. It's the work in the story that gives such potential energy to the performances from Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano, and it's a great reminder that everything comes back to the script. Before we get to the next lesson, why not take the old like and subscribe buttons for a spin? And remember to turn on notifications because there will be more great content like this. There is no dialogue for the first 14 minutes of the movie, so when Daniel finally does speak, his words are given extra weight by the silence that preceded them.
Now you have a great chance here. But bear in mind you can lose it all if you're not careful.
We understand that this is a man who speaks only when he needs to, much like he'd only pick up a wrench if he had a job where he needed a wrench. Like a wrench, dialogue is a tool that characters use to accomplish a task, and often that task is getting something they want. In his opening monologue, what Daniel wants is for a room of people to sell him their oil rights, and he's using his words to accomplish that task. He's basically a salesman, and what he's selling is himself. Not all characters are salesmen, but they all want something, and they should use their dialogue as a tool to get it. What's important is that the dialogue is a tool for the character to get what they want, not just a tool for the writer to share some new piece of information with the audience. That's what so often leads to bad exposition. Of course, sometimes what a character wants is to hurt somebody else, and in those cases, their dialogue is a very specific kind of tool, a weapon. Daniel Plainview uses his words as weapons throughout the movie, most notably when he has his falling out with his son, H.W., and of course in the famous ending scene with Eli Sunday. Of course, he ends up bludgeoning Eli with more than just words. I mean, there are a lot of different kinds of weapons, like bowling pins. I should add that just because dialogue is used with a purpose doesn't mean it can't be fun or casual. Your characters can sit around and joke or talk about nothing, but even in those cases, it speaks to some deeper need that they have. Since characters are using their dialogue to get what they want, they may lie and manipulate to further their ends.
I enjoy all things.
Are you hunting?
Hunting for quail.
I paid him $10,000 cash in hand. Just like that.
Daniel Plainview lies throughout There Will Be Blood, and while I would not advocate for dishonesty in real life, in a script, lies can be fantastic. Lies tell us that the character cares more about the thing they're lying for than they do about truth or even about the person that they're lying to. Daniel lies frequently and easily because he doesn't like or respect other people, therefore he doesn't think they deserve to know the truth. All that matters to him is getting what he wants.
I see the worst in people, Henry. I don't need to look past seeing them to get all I need.
Lies are also fantastic because they can get the characters into trouble. Whenever you lie, there's a risk of getting caught, and that adds drama to the story. Since Daniel lies so much, it makes his rare forays into honesty all the more powerful. In one memorable exchange, he lets his guard down and opens up to the man claiming to be his half-brother Henry, and he shares his honest thoughts.
I have a competition in me. I want no one else to succeed.
What Daniel says isn't that surprising. It aligns with what we've seen from him so far. But a moment of honesty can be great at crystallizing or confirming all the other character work done up to that point through subtext or action. Of course, this requires that the writer has done the work earlier, building the case, which is now being solidified. If you have the moment of honesty without first building the case, that moment isn't going to have much potency. In storytelling, most of the complications come from within the story. They're generally the result of the character's own actions or from some other character or some other thing in the story. They don't usually come from out of nowhere. Except sometimes they do come from out of nowhere. When Henry shows up claiming to be Daniel's half-brother, it kind of seems to be out of the blue, but we buy it for a couple of reasons. One reason we buy it is that it makes sense. As Daniel becomes more successful, it's logical that people would come out of the woodwork wanting a piece of it. Another reason we buy Henry's sudden appearance is that ultimately it doesn't prove helpful to Daniel. When things come out of the blue to help the protagonist, we call that a deus ex machina, and to the audience it can feel like cheating. At first, Henry's appearance does seem helpful. We see Daniel relax and enjoy himself for the first time. But ultimately, it turns into a complication when Daniel finds out Henry is an imposter and murders him. That leads to him getting blackmailed into being baptized. The lesson here is you can give your story a complication from the outside world to add fresh energy. If it's a complication the audience will buy. You'll often see complications or reveals like this at the midpoint in movies. If you want to check out a more in-depth look at midpoints, I'll link to my video analyzing the midpoint in Parasite. There is an enduring philosophical debate over whether people can truly change, and that's not something I'm going to be able to resolve in this video. But one thing every screenwriter needs to decide is how much their protagonist will change over the course of their story. In There Will Be Blood, Daniel Plainview certainly changes over the course of the story. He isn't murdering people at the start, for one, but I totally would buy it if he did murder someone at the start, because I think that potential was in there all along.
I'm gonna bury you underground.
And one way to think of how your character changes over the course of the story is to amplify some pre-existing aspect of that character. You could be amplifying a positive attribute, like bravery, or it could be something more negative. The approach here is to show flashes of this attribute and then grow it as the story progresses. Audiences love to be surprised, but those moments are more potent when the character is being surprised as well. Early in the movie, Daniel meets Paul Sunday, played by Paul Dano.
What's your name?
Paul.
And then later, Daniel meets Eli Sunday, also played by Paul Dano.
My name is Eli.
Yes, you're Eli Sunday.
This reveal of an identical twin is surprising and a great sight gag. Daniel is going through the same thing that the audience is going through. This lets him act as a stand-in or a conduit for the audience's feelings. This makes the audience feel validated and connected to the scene, but it also strengthens their relationship with Daniel's character, a relationship that's gonna get tested over the course of the movie. Speaking of twins, there are moments of twinning throughout the story. You can also think of them as parallels or echoes. For instance, in order to build the pipeline he needs, Daniel is forced to be baptized by Eli. Daniel has to publicly repent and confess his sins.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my boy!
Then at the end of the film, that scene is echoed when Daniel forces Eli to confess that he's a false prophet.
I am a false prophet. God is a superstition.
Not only are these fantastic character moments, but they also pull together the different parts of the movie and make it feel like it was all for a reason. It's satisfying in the same way that a good meal leaves you satisfied. The audience walks out believing that their time was well spent and that this was a movie worth watching.
I'm finished.
Alright, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe learned something. From all of us here at ARC Studio, be kind to yourselves and happy writing.